Welcome to Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church's online worship. I'm Keith Prairie, and I'm a member of the worship committee. My pronouns are he and him. We are a freely gathered, open, welcoming community supported by your contributions, which can be made with the donate button on our website, by going to our Breeze program if you are a member, or by mailing your check to 524 Allen Avenue, Portland, Maine. Please note if the donation is your pledge or a gift to our Share the Plate for April. Our Share the Plate recipient for April is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI. NAMI is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for millions of Americans affected by mental illness. To learn more about this organization, go out to the website linked on our order of service today. This morning's service about trees is presented by Allen Avenue's Worship Committee. Lay-led worship is a tradition at this and many other Unitarian Universalist societies. At Allen Avenue, the Worship Committee either sponsors or presents one such service a month. On most other Sundays, our worship is led by our minister, the Reverend Donna Dahlem. You are invited to join us today, April 18th, for our congregational conversation and the coffee hour following the service. To learn more about our Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church, please go out to our website at A2U2.org.
Good morning. I'm Anna Noyes Benoit, and I'm happy to share this chalice lighting with you this morning. We light this chalice as a symbol of our own connection to the stars in the sky, to the warmth of the sun, and our own bright place in the universe.
Good morning. My name is Erica Bartlett, and for our Time for All Ages, I want to talk to you about pine trees. I've known for a long time that Maine is called the pine tree state, but until recently, I couldn't have told you much about pine trees or even how to tell if a tree was a pine at all. Most of the time when I looked at trees with needles, I just thought of it as a pine tree. But earlier this year, I decided I wanted to learn more about trees. And since it was winter, I figured I'd start with the trees that have needles, since it's really hard to identify trees when they don't have leaves. That's when I learned that even trees with needles are very different. For example, some other common trees with needles are fir and spruce trees. These ones have needles that connect only one by one to a branch, as you can see in this picture of a blue spruce twig. The needles aren't in any sort of group. But pine trees are different. Pine trees have needles that are grouped, usually in clusters of 2, 3, or 5. Here in Maine, the most common type of pine is an eastern white pine, which has needles in a group of 5, as you can see here. The needles also spread out like a little fan, and they feel rather soft. Once I knew that, when I went for walks around my neighborhood, I started looking at all the trees to tell if they were pines or not. If it's not a pine, I won't always be able to say what it is, but I've gotten pretty good at being able to tell if something is a pine. And that's when I realized that the tree right outside my house is an eastern white pine. Knowing that made it feel more like a neighbor or a friend, like I could greet it by name. It was nice to know what kind of tree it was. So I decided to learn more and found out some other information about the eastern white pine. First, it became the official state tree in 1945. Pine trees also grow fast, gaining about a foot or more in height each year. The tallest recorded one in Maine is 120 feet tall, although they're usually 70 to 80 feet. The needles are long, about 4 to 8 inches, and the cones are also about 4 to 8 inches, and the scales are smooth and thin. Eastern white pines are also important to many animals, not only for food, but as cover from predators. You might see chipmunks or red squirrels eating the seeds, and gray squirrels, beavers, black bears, porcupines, rabbits, and snowshoe hares also eat the bark, foliage, and seeds. Birds also like the pine trees. Some use it for nesting sites, including hawks, owls, ravens, and crows. Other birds like to eat the seeds, including the black-capped chickadee, pine siskin, pine warbler, and pine grosbeaks. People use the trees a lot too. In the past, white pines were used to build ships, and they're still used a lot to build doors, trim, panels, boxes, and cabinets, among other things. All in all, the eastern white pine is an important tree to the state, and it's nice to be able to identify it. Maybe you can try to see if you can spot the pine trees in your neighborhood. Just remember, they're the ones with the needles like a little fan. And if you can identify them, then maybe those trees will feel more like your neighbors, just like mine did.
Good morning. My name's Mike Luce. When I was a kid, I had a normal relationship with trees. There was a nice little copse of trees in the back of our yard where I built a tree house amongst 3 of them. There was also a really nice wooded area within bicycling distance where I'd play along the banks of the Frost Gully Brook. Our next door neighbor had an area with some old fallen giants we used to play on. Trees were just around us, and we didn't think about them a lot. They were just out in the landscape. Whenever my life took me to places without trees, I did feel a lack, a lot like I miss the ocean when it's not within easy reach. Trees talk to us in the wind. It provides some shelter from the elements. It's mesmerizing to stand quietly in a forest and listen to the wind in the branches. A miserable year in Kansas made me acutely aware of how much they shelter us from wind and rain. Another year in South Korea showed me what can happen when a landscape is denuded by war. Trees were still thin on the slopes when I was there. So trees were nice, and I missed them when I didn't have them around. But my relationship with them transformed when I took woodworking up as a form of self-therapy. I'd burned out in social work and taken a year off to consider things while I was driving a cab. I knew I was going back, but I had to get a survival strategy in a profession that can eat you up. I needed a creative, contemplative outlet. A friend had guided me into making a simple flute stand, and I'd loved it, so that hook had been set. In the space of a year, I jumped back into the fray, working at the shelter, got married, made the first steps in woodworking. Not long after, I found this church, but maybe that's another piece sometime. As I've progressed in learning how to work with wood, I've come to rely on the guidance of the wood more and more. When a tree's harvested for this use, it still has a say. It breathes with the weather, something you need to account for when you're making furniture. Its grain guides tools and provides intriguing figures. Sometimes the grain takes the initiative when I carve, telling me how things will be shaped in subtle ways. Tells me how I should present the blade so the cut will be smooth. When I'm going to begin a new project, I start listening to the wood long before I start hacking away. Normally, I'll put some pieces on the bench which might complement each other and just stare, rearranging them once in a while, put a little dab of oil on to get a better look at the finished color and grain. They may stay there a few days, I just live with them, and eventually we sort of agree on a starting point. And I have a general idea of the direction, but that will change. Sometimes it's more than just making something appropriate. It can even be the particular tree. A few years ago, I saw a couple of limbs which had been trimmed from our Don redwood and left laying on the lawn. I grabbed them just because and stashed them in my shop to let them dry. They were pretty wet. A little over a year ago, our congregation had the joy of ordaining Bo Rivers and Molly Brewer into ministry. Rick Kimball and I collaborated to present them each with a picture of that tree with the frame made of that wood. There was just enough to do it, no pieces extra left over if I slipped up. I got a little nervous about that, but it was just supposed to work out that way. Maybe trees and the universe know some things before we do. This is what's left. I'm finding the Green Man in there right now. I've heard the phrase the wood wide web, referring to the communication within and amongst trees. Sometimes I feel like I'm plugging in.
Lady of the season's laughter, in the summer's warmth is near. When the winter follows after, teach our spirits not to fear. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning year.
Sister of the evening starlight, in the falling shadows stay here among us till the far light of tomorrow's dawning ray. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning day.
Mother of the generations, in whose love all life is worth, everlasting celebrations, bring your labors safe to birth. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning earth.
God goddess of all time's progression, stand with us when we engage, hands and hearts to end oppression, writing history's fairer page. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning age.
Hi, I'm Susie Hubley, and I'm going to talk about the trees in my yard. When I bought my house in 1984, the backyard consisted of some ugly, patchy looking grass, a huge Norway maple, and an ancient, very picturesque apple tree. In 1999, I dug out the lawn and made the yard into a garden. And the towering Norway maple worried me, especially after a microburst knocked down 5 other massive trees in the neighborhood. So I had the tree taken down, but not without a little bit of guilt. The old apple tree remains, along with a slew of newer trees and shrubs. Each one of them touches me in a very deep way for its beauty and beyond. In a way, my trees are living symbols of what I value the most. The apple tree's fruits are sour and completely unpalatable, but its pink and white blossoms and their heavenly scent make me nostalgic for a past that I actually never had here in my own very old house, and also for my own past. I always think of my father, who absolutely loved apple blossoms, and each spring he would ask me to bring him some. And sometimes I would try to remember, but sometimes I forgot, and the blooms would have gone by the time I got out there to cut them. So there are always a few pangs of guilt when I see the apple blossoms. Other trees embody my hopes for the future. I've made a pledge with the Wild Seed Project to rewild my yard, to begin to populate it with native species, which support our native wildlife in a way that imported species haven't evolved to do. Among other functions, native plants are crucially important in the future of our birds, as they host the kind of larvae that these birds' babies are equipped to eat. I actually had a head start on that because early on I bought 3 serviceberry shrubs and 3 eastern redbuds. Now every spring brings extravagant masses of tiny pink flowers on the redbuds and the more restrained loveliness of the serviceberry's white blossoms. Both host many types of caterpillars, and their plants provide food for wildlife. In the fall, it's fun to watch birds swooping in and teetering on the thin, swaying serviceberry branches to grab the berries. My other native trees include a moosewood or striped maple, which wouldn't grow for many years, but then mysteriously began shooting up about 4 years ago and now is about 10 feet tall. That slender, graceful tree holds a special place in my heart. Another tree, a black cherry, was a happy accident. It seeded itself, and I was ambivalent about letting it stay, but I did, and come to find out, black cherry is one of the stars among ecologically beneficial plants. It hosts more than 450 species of butterflies and moths, and many birds and mammals eat the fruit. Doug Tallamy, an entomologist and author who has spearheaded a drive to restore native plants, calls it a keystone plant, one that has a disproportionately large effect on sustaining the caterpillars and other larvae so crucial to native bird survival. When I learned that, I felt like I'd been granted an undeserved blessing. It's not often that you do the right thing completely by accident.
Hi, I'm Person.
And I'm Tree.
Hey, Tree, got a minute? I want to interview you.
What for?
I'm writing a treatise on trees.
I think that I shall never see a treatise lovely as a tree. You going to celebrate the lovely?
On the contrary, I'm a UU looking for something to fix, like arboreal faults and flaws.
You've got a nerve. People have flaws too, like, failure to floss. Get it?
Sigh. Bad humor isn't your worst problem. You guys cause trouble every single season of the year.
What? Think about the fall. We're the pinnacle of autumnal glory.
Especially in the fall when you cover our lawns with dead leaves, so we have to rake them up.
Sounds like a personal problem. Leave the leaves alone to turn into good, rich mulch. Our gift to you. But no, some people even burn them. Up in smoke they go to poison the sky. Give me a break.
Yeah, well, speaking of breaks, there's the winter flaw. Your limbs break and fall on power lines, so whole crews of people have to brave dangerous weather to get power going again.
So, what do you guys do in the winter? Chop down trees and drag them indoors to dry up and die. You got vegetarians who think it's wrong to grow cows just to kill and eat. Why not arborarians?
I'll admit that broken branches aren't all that bad. Some people carve them into useful and beautiful art.
You think my limbs would rather be cute little kittens or human heads? Have another think. Anyway, big boy, how about spring? What's our oh so horrendous vernal crime?
Pollen, appalling pollen all over the place. I used 2 boxes of tissues a day last spring.
Yeah, tissues made from trees you chop down. Anyway, what's so hot about people in the spring?
Well, we sing songs of peeper bliss and robin's nests and crocus bulbs.
That's when you aren't drilling holes and driving metal spiles into tree trunks so they can hang up pails to collect sap. You try looking down to see your vital life juices dripping into a bucket so people can get cavities eating sweet pancakes. You're sapping our strength.
Oh, I don't think so. You keep right on growing, and that's your summer sin, by the way.
What is?
Growing. You get so big in our yards that we have to prune you. And you get so big in the forest that you crowd each other out and you need thinning.
What? You cut off our arms and legs and make a mess and then blame us? Oh, go prune yourself.
Ouch!
Ouch is right. And as for us crowding each other out, maybe we just like to get close together. As for thinning things out, people are much too good at thinning each things out.
What's that supposed to mean?
What that's supposed to mean is a wrecked environment that's killing plants and animals and people. And you complain about us?
Well, maybe I do need to be a little bit more positive about trees.
Believe it, mister. Think about the good stuff beauty and shade and coconuts.
Well, I hear you, but it's tough to be positive in today's world.
A lot of people have trouble with that. My worst dream is getting turned into newsprint that keeps screaming out bad news.
Maybe I need to find something else to fix. I really am quite fond of trees.
And I'll admit that people aren't all bad. I kind of like having kids climbing all over me. And even getting my branches carved up has a bright side. Call it immortality.
So what do we do now?
We start working together, people and trees. I think that I have never seen any world fixer as lovely as you and me.
That's too many syllables. Joyce Kilmer would disown you.
So I got some flaws, just like you. Stop complaining. It's time for all of us to act. I'll start by dropping seeds to make more trees that take carbon dioxide out of the air.
Well, and I'll start by dropping my treatise and raising a stink about cutting down trees for a CMP power corridor. And I'll let your seeds grow.
Great, we're a team.
Want to shake on it?
Not unless you want a bunch of twigs in your hair.
Who cares about that? Twigs are better than tangles, as in tangling with you. Let's accept each other for who we are. But this is COVID time, so let's not shake hands. Let's bump elbows instead.
You got it. Then let's fix the whole world.
Speaking of trees as we have been this morning, our choir's anthem today is an ode to our Don Redwood tree, sung to the tune of O Tannenbaum. Here are the lyrics with a few choral repeats, omitted. Don Redwood tree, communal tree, your dancing branches call us. They draw us into love's embrace and hold us all in mystic grace. Don Redwood tree, communal tree, your dancing branches call us. Don Redwood tree, great mystery, evoking awe and wonder, at roots so deep and life so tall, and spirit's reason for it all. Don Redwood tree, tenacious tree, rich symbol of resilience, you bear the ice of winter storm to reach the warmth of vernal morn. Don Redwood tree, transforming tree, diversity embodied. Your leaves of lush green turn red-brown, protecting you by drifting down. Don Redwood tree, eternal tree, true promise of tomorrow. You rise from seed to self-renew by dropping cone to be new you. Don Redwood tree, great swaying tree, our crowning gift of glory, our guarding spirit high above, our home of faith and hope and love. Don Redwood tree, great swaying tree, our crowning gift of glory. So, there are the words, and you know the tune. Feel free to hum along with us as the photos flow by.
Don Redwood tree, communal tree, your dancing branches call us.
Yea, draw us into love's embrace and hold us all in mystic grace.
Don Redwood tree, communal tree, your dancing branches call us.
Don Redwood tree, great mystery, evoking awe and wonder.
At roots so deep and life so tall, and spirit's reason for it all.
Don Redwood tree, great mystery, evoking awe and wonder.
Don Redwood tree, tenacious tree, rich symbol of resilience.
You bear the ice of winter storm to reach the warmth of vernal morn.
Don Redwood tree, tenacious tree, rich symbol of resilience.
Don Redwood tree, transforming tree, diversity embodied.
Your leaves of lush green turn red-brown, protecting you by drifting down.
Don Redwood tree, transforming tree, diversity embodied.
Don Redwood tree, eternal tree, true promise of tomorrow.
You rise from seed to self-renew by dropping cone to be new you.
Don Redwood tree, eternal tree, true
to promise of tomorrow.
Dawn redwood tree, great swaying tree, our crowning gift of glory.
Our guarding spirit high above, our home of faith and hope and love.
Dawn redwood tree, great swaying tree, our crowning gift of glory.
My name is Erica Bartlett, and one of my earliest memories is of a cedar tree on Swan Island, otherwise known as the Stephen Powell Wildlife Reserve. My family went camping there every summer when I was growing up, starting when I was 4, and from the first, the cedar tree caught our attention. It was one of a pair of trees down by the Kennebec River, but this one had broad, low limbs that made it easy to climb, even with my short legs. My brother and I, and our 3 friends who went with us, clambered over and under that tree many times for the next several years. Here's one picture of the 5 of us when I was about 7 or 8. Later, I also brought other friends with me, and I came to think of the tree itself as a kind of friend. Here's a family photo with my friend Trish from high school. I even decided to have my senior yearbook picture taken with me sitting in the tree and writing in my journal. So it was a shock to see the cedar tree after the ice storm in 1998. It had survived, but some of the limbs that had held me over all those summers were gone. It hurt to see, and while I was glad the tree lived, I grieved the loss. I'm grateful to still have a photo of it from before, a lovely black and white picture that my dad took that hangs in my bedroom where I can see it every day. Perhaps it's because of the cedar tree that I've often been drawn to trees. Or perhaps it's because, as Gretel Elrich noted, quote, "The tree is an aerial garden. The human, standing, is only a different upsweep and articulation of cells. How tree-like we are. How human the tree." End quote. Whatever the reason, while other people might be interested in old buildings and ancient art, I often prefer the living history of trees. One example is when I did my study abroad in England. I traveled around the country, and since I'd always been a Robin Hood fan, I paid a visit to Sherwood Forest. And what I remember most was the major oak, where in theory, Robin and his merry men had secret meetings. It was a massive, sprawling, 1,000-year-old tree with a girth of 33 feet. It weighed about 22 tons and needed support for many of its limbs. I found it awe-inspiring and humbling to be near a living being so old. And when I went to a work conference in San Francisco, I stayed a couple of extra days to go to the Muir Woods National Monument. The redwoods were simply incredible, and I got such a feeling of peace and strength from them. I could have stayed much longer than I did, basking in their tremendous presence. In recent years, I've also turned to trees for comfort. After hearing the results of the 2016 election, when I felt deeply shaken and uncertain about the future, I went to Evergreen Cemetery and sat with my back against the trees, or simply leaned against them for support. Doing that helped steady me, feeling like I would be able to find solid ground again. Here are a couple of my favorite trees there. And some cedar trees there as well, although different than the one on Swan Island. Then after the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, I decided I needed to focus on something that wasn't about people. And again, I turned to trees. I started reading and learning more about them, and it was a wonderful reminder of the vital, enduring life that goes on apart from humans. It was nice, too, to be able to recognize certain trees, and it was fun to try to puzzle out what I was seeing. It's been too cold and wintry so far for me to sit by trees, but even on winter walks, I sometimes pause and put my bare hand against tree trunks. It gives me a feeling of kinship, of the interconnected web of life. And thinking of that reminds me of something Anne Labastille wrote about her own experience leaning against trees. Quote, "The rough bark was pressing against my skin. It was as though the tree was pouring its life force into my body. What I give back to the tree, I cannot imagine. I hope they receive something, because trees are among my closest friends." End quote. I too hope the trees get something back from me, and I'm continually grateful for all I receive from them.
I'm John Howard, and this is The Voices of Trees. Trees have voices, though it requires another medium, like water or wind, for us to hear them. The first time in spring, after the leaves are fully out, there comes a day or night of solid, steady rain. Listen. Hear that sound of rain on leaves, how profoundly calming it is, evoking a sense of extensive, abundant life, tree life, this being with whom we share a planet but rarely consider unless eating its fruit, admiring a display of blossoms or the grain of a piece of wood. This being makes its presence known in this spring downpour, forcing us to pause and listen to the voices of trees, of uncountable multitudes of trees. Whether we're in the country or in town doesn't matter. That sound speaks of a communal life force extending beyond our hearing, seeming without boundaries, which for a moment compels us to shift our attention to something bigger than ourselves. Wind will have a similar effect, and for me, the star performer, the star vocalist, is the pine. If you have one in your yard, you will know its voice. A rushing sigh, a haunting, lonely sound. Wherever it happens to be, the voice of the pine evokes for me a wilder space, somewhere remote, like a memory of wilderness from before houses, roads, and telephone poles. You might not notice walking along on a windy day until you reach a certain distance from it. And then you step over into a different space, a space defined by this singular, beautiful sound. Hiking the trails in early March on that extremely cold and windy Monday we had, I heard a remarkable tree voice that told of the toughness of trees, of their endurance. The groaning of frozen trunks bending in the wind, and the shrill, whining creak of limbs rubbing together. and occasionally a sudden crack or pop like a gunshot. This was a voice of protest and stubborn survival. The trees are protesting the appalling cold. But though the trails were littered by fallen twigs and pine cones, the trees themselves remain undaunted. On another hike, in late fall, when it was balmy and slightly damp, I seemed to be followed by a particular bird. It was only one bird with a tentative, gentle call. But I kept hearing it, walking up, down, around, following the winding trail. It couldn't be the same bird, but it sure sounded like it. The bird belonged to the woods, and with that dreamlike sense of repeated patterns, always different yet always the same, it was as though I'd entered a universe of the eternal now. These trees with this borrowed voice, this cheerful avatar, helped me recalibrate and reconnect to a life on a different level. It's why I go to the woods, to hear the voices of trees and feel alive again.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the kinship we all share, sorrow, gentle thoughts and mild, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
As we enter the week, may our roots be deep and our branches spread wide. Blessed be.